I'll be silent to you all. Just a word of encouragement that if we are wearing a spotted robe today, that God is able to make it white in the blood of the Lamb. And so be encouraged. This is what the church is for sin-sick people, to run to Jesus for deliverance. And so as I sing this song, may it reach to the core of your heart, and your soul will be blessed, and you'll be drawn closer to God. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool. Though your sins be as scarlet, though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. They shall be as white as snow. Hear the voice that entreats you, O return unto God. Hear the voice that entreats you, O return unto God. He's of great compassion and of wondrous love. Hear the voice that entreats you. Hear the voice that entreats you. Oh, returning unto God. Oh, returning unto God. He'll forgive your transgressions and remember them no more. He'll forgive your transgression and remember them no more. Look up to me, ye people, say the Lord your God. He'll forgive your transgression. He'll forgive your transgressions and remember them no more. And remember them no more.
Thank you, Garfield. First of all, I want to say thank you. Support has been overwhelming. And it's ironic that I was in the middle of a series on church, who we are, why we do what we do. And then God showed me a very good reason why we do what we do. We walk together. Now, I'm not preaching this morning because I had to. Several people offered. And there were many moments where I didn't want to. But I feel called to. I want to begin this morning with a quote from patriarchs and prophets to give us some perspective on the world that we live in. As they witnessed the first signs of decay in the drooping flower and the falling leaf, Adam and his companion Eve mourned more deeply than people now mourn over their own dead loved ones. When the beautiful trees dropped their leaves, the scene brought to mind the stern fact that death is the fate of every living thing. One of the things I love most about Jesus is that he does not always tell you what you want to hear, but he always tells you what you need to know, even when you don't want to hear it. So I invite you to begin with me where Fabian began with us in the Gospel of John, chapter 16. Now, as I've said before, and I will say again, we tend to pick verses from the Bible like roses from a rose garden, forgetting where they came from. This verse in John 16:33 is very well known, but let's look at where it came from. He's been teaching his disciples, but they've been having a discussion about some serious matters. Verse 30. Disciples speaking, "Now we are sure that you know all things, and you have no need that anyone should question you. By this we believe that you came forth from God." And Jesus answered and said to them, "Do you believe?" ? Indeed, the hour is coming, yes, has now come, that you will be scattered each to his own, and you will leave me alone. And yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. So he's speaking to his friends that he knows are going to turn on him when he needs them the most. What does he say to them? "I speak these things that you may have peace in me. In the world, you" what? "You might have, you may have, you could have, you will have. But be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world." Jesus is honest enough in his own suffering, in his own abandonment, to say to those who are going to abandon him, "I still desire peace for you. And I'm telling you, you're going to go through trouble, I'm going to go through trouble, we're all going to go through trouble, but don't be afraid, be of good cheer. Because I have overcome the world." The disciples had just told him, we don't need to question you anymore. No one needs to question you anymore. Have you ever questioned God? Have you ever come to the place where you thought, okay, now I got it, now I'll never question him again, only to find yourself questioning again? There's nothing wrong with questioning God. In fact, when we have trouble, that's exactly what we should be doing. I invite you to turn back to the 11th chapter of John's Gospel. If you have a Bible that puts words in italics, randomly through your Bible, that means that that word was supplied. It's not actually in the original, and the English supplied it to try and make sense of what was being said. John 11, verse 1 simply says, now a certain, and man is supplied, so the Greek is saying, now a certain was sick. And what the Greek is trying to say is, this was a somebody. This was not some random person. This was a certain person. We all know who he was. This is a definite person. A certain was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. And if you're familiar with the Gospels at all, this is the home where Jesus went to get away from it all. This was the home of the people that he loved the most. These were his closest friends. Jesus had no children. He had no spouse. His own parents, his own siblings didn't understand him. They were constantly questioning him. This was the place where he went for peace. And now Lazarus is sick. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. If you ever wonder if Mary Magdalene and Mary, the sister of Martha, are the same person, there's the verse. Verse 3, therefore the sisters went to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. Perhaps sometimes you wonder, well, maybe when I pray, God doesn't answer me because he doesn't love me as much as he loves other people. It's normal to feel that way, but it's not the truth. Mary and Martha sent a message to Jesus because they knew him, they loved him, they trusted him, and they knew if anyone can do something, it's Jesus. Verse 4, when Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not to death, but that the glory of God, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Remember that verse. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. That's twice in 3 verses it's told us Jesus loves Lazarus. Verse 6, so when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Now this is the Jesus who's always on the move, and now he needs to move, and he's not moving. After this, he said to the disciples, come, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews seek to stone you, and you're going there? Things are not good in Jerusalem for Jesus. He's been avoiding the place, and the disciples are saying, if you go back there, they're going to kill you. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, but he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. These things he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go to wake him up. Disciples said, Lord, if he's sleeping, then he'll recover. Best not to wake him up. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. Didn't Jesus just say a few verses ago that he's not going to die? Verse 14, Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad. Not for Lazarus, not for Mary and Martha, not for me. I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Then Thomas, who was always sure the worst was going to happen, we all know people like that, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let's go with him that we may die with him." When Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Funeral's over, the wake is over, everything's over. He's been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles. Many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Now I want you to start paying closer attention. Now Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary stayed in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, we called you and you didn't come. If you had been here." My brother would not have died. Now I want to pause here, and I'm not trying to get after anybody. I'm just trying to expose our own nature. We're okay to sit and flip through the news and watch thousands of other people die. But when it comes to our door, God, where are you? I'm okay with them dying, but my brother, my wife, my child, my mother, why? But Martha's not done. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha says to Jesus, "I know that, Jesus. I know he's going to rise again in the resurrection at the last day." And Jesus said to her, "Listen, I am the resurrection and he who believes in me, though he may die, yet he will. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this? Now in Sabbath school this morning there was a lot of discussion about the Bible. You know, if we had the Bible and just read the Bible, we'd be okay. But if you read verse 25 and then you read verse 26 and you separate the two, you can create two totally different truths. Verse 25 will create a truth that even if you die, it's okay because you'll live again. But then if you take 26 and separate it out all by itself, you will say that, well, if you really believed in God, if you really had faith, you would never die at all. That's why the Bible is not to be read by men, it's to be interpreted by God. We are to ask God what he means when he says what he says. Because in the beginning of the story, he said, "Guys, he's not going to die. Don't worry, he's not going to die." And then a few verses later, he says, "Well, he's dead." And then he says, "Well, he'll rise again because he's dead, but that's okay. He'll rise again." And then he says, "Well, actually, if you believe, you'll never die." "27. She says to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Messiah, the One, the Anointed One, the Son of God, who was to come into the world." When she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, "The teacher has come and is calling for you." Now, we don't have time, but she had just told Jesus she believed he was the one, and then she went back and told Mary he was the teacher. Our emotions rise and fall. 29, as soon as she heard that, Mary rose quickly and came to him when Jesus had not yet come to the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. And the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went, followed her, saying, "She is going to the tomb to weep there." Then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." And Jesus wept. Was Jesus weeping for Lazarus? Why was he weeping? Was he weeping for himself? He didn't need to weep for Lazarus. Lazarus was not only unaware of everything, but Lazarus was soon to be alive again. He wasn't weeping for himself because he knew that Lazarus was soon to be alive again. Why is he weeping? The crowd thinks that Jesus is weeping for himself because they said, "See how he loved him. He's so heartbroken." Jesus is not heartbroken for his loss. He's not heartbroken for Lazarus. He's heartbroken for our suffering. At the beginning of this whole thing, he told the disciples, this is going to happen for God's glory to be revealed. But even though Jesus knows there's a purpose, he knows it needs to happen, he knows this is all part of a plan, he still weeps because of our suffering. Now I want to fast forward a little bit. What happened next? You know the story. Jesus marches up to the tomb, speaks to his Father in front of everybody. And then what happens? Says, "Lazarus, come on out." What happens? Comes out. Then what happened? What do you think happened a couple years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later? What happened? He died again. Typically, we pray most fervently when something is wrong in the moment, and we want that thing to be fixed. Jesus is like a parent with a toddler who hears the screaming understands the pain, doesn't enjoy the fact the toddler is not happy, but loves us enough to maintain what needs to be happening in the big picture. Not that long after this, Jesus told his disciples, I'm leaving. I'm going to die. You're all going to abandon me. And they argued and they disagreed and they were overwhelmed and discouraged. In the midst of all that, he said, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms or mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Then he went to the garden. And for all this talk of I've already overcome the world, and for all this talk of I'm going to do this for you and I'm going to die on your behalf, for all the talk, when he got to the garden, suddenly his prayer life got a little more intense too. Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. This is Jesus talking to his Father. And God never picked up the phone. No answer came. No response. Nothing. Deafening silence. Jesus dials the number again. Dad. You got to get me out of here. If there's any way to get me out of here, get me out of here. Nothing. Nothing. He calls again. Still nothing. When you call out and nobody answers, when you call out and it bounces back off the ceiling and you feel like God doesn't listen to you, you are not alone. Sometimes when Jesus called, nobody answered. They came to the garden, they took him like a criminal, they dragged him through a mockery of trials, pounded him onto a wooden cross, hung him up. In the middle of all that, when it's almost over, he cries out, Dad. Why? Somebody well-meaning this week sent me a little devotional. You know, we shouldn't ask the why questions. There's no benefit to it. It's funny because my Jesus, he asked why questions. Why? Why am I here? Why did you do this to me? Why aren't you doing something? Why have you forsaken me? You know, it used to be in the Adventist church, and you may not know this, it used to be in the Adventist church that once you got married, man, that was like a death sentence. You're in it forever. The only thing that could get you out of marriage was death, and then we added infidelity, and now we've added abuse and abandonment. So technically, Jesus could have said, God, you've abandoned me, like I don't owe you anything anymore, like we're done. You abandoned me. I needed you, you didn't come. We're divorced, it's over. Do you know what Jesus said next? Right after he said, why have you forsaken me? He said, into your hands. Jesus, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that if you ask God, he'll give you whatever you ask for. I don't know why you did what you did. I don't know why you didn't come when I called you. I don't know why you've allowed it to get so bad. But even now, Jesus, I know that you can do anything. Father, I don't know why you've abandoned me. I don't know why this feels so horrible and seems so wrong, but you are all I have. And I'm giving all of me to all of you. Do you know why God didn't answer him in the garden? Because he already knew the answer. There's several places in the scriptures where Jesus and God say, you have no need that I should answer you in this. Just yesterday, I think it was, maybe the day before, Nathaniel was looking for his soccer ball. He said, Dad, it was in the truck. I can't find it. Where is it? I said, I don't know. So he started to rephrase the question a different way to ask me again where it was. I said, Nathaniel, I don't know. He started to rephrase the question a third different way to ask me again. Nathaniel, stop. You can ask me as many ways as you want. You can ask me as many times as you want. I don't know. And asking me over and over won't change anything about it. I don't know. What did Jesus ask his Father in the garden? If it is possible. He knew as he asked the question, it wasn't possible. We may want it to be different, but it wasn't possible. This week it was our family. Next week it's going to be somebody else's family. Probably today. Someone just told me in Peace River on the same day or the day after a 3-year-old died. In this world, you will have trouble. But be of good cheer, because it won't always be this way. Because someday soon I'm going to put myself where humanity has been. And God won't be able to rescue me. And I'm going to do it so that together my Father and I can rescue all of you. If I can encourage you with anything this morning, it's this. Do not wait until you're in a storm to figure out who the master of the storms is. It's not the time. It's not the time to learn CPR when someone's dying in front of you. It's not the time. You either know or you don't know. And I'm telling you, this world is full of storms. You can walk away from God and go through the storms without Him, or you can stay with Him and go through them with Him. The storms will come either way. But when you know the master of the storms, it's not the same. In closing, I ask you to open your Bibles to the book of Revelation. Chapter 21. You know, when Jonah wanted Nineveh to burn because they're such bad people, God described them as a people who do not know their right hand from their left. And this week I've observed a lot of family on people surrounding this whole situation who don't know their right hand from their left. I don't know what your picture of heaven is. I don't know what your picture of death is or your hope of the afterlife is like, but I hope that it's based on what Jesus says and not on what tradition says or what your parents think or anything like that. The Bible says that someday, and I think sooner than we think, the sky is going to open. A voice is going to be heard, like the sound of many waters, like the sound of many thunders. And some people who are living are going to look up and say, "This is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us." Then we're going to go to his home. We're going to spend 1,000 years there. And then Revelation 21 is going to happen. For I saw new heavens, new atmospheres, and a new earth. Anybody who's studied science knows that we haven't just corrupted our planet, we've corrupted our atmosphere, we've corrupted everything we can touch. For the first atmosphere and the first earth have passed away. And there was no more sea. And that has meaning, deep meaning. We don't have time today. Verse 2. I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. If you think that you're waiting for Jesus, no one is as eagerly waiting for that day as he is. I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, "Behold, the tabernacle, the home of God, is with men. He will dwell with them. They will be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God, just as he walked with Adam and Eve." Verse 4. Keep in mind, we've been in heaven for 1,000 years before verse 4. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death. There will be no more sorrow, no crying. There will be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. I'll be very frank with you at the end with some practical advice. My sister isn't sure what she believes. When Job was suffering, when he'd lost absolutely everything, except his wife and his own life, 3 friends came to visit him. They sat with him for days in stunned silence. And then they began to speak. It would have been better if they had just stayed in silence. When people are hurting and they don't know which direction to look, you don't need to come up with anything brilliant. Just sit with them. I can't tell her this because she's not ready, but I'm going to tell you. There's a reason for everything. And when those 1,000 years, when we're with him in his home, before we come back and he makes us a new home, he's going to open to us all the whys. And Ellen White boldly makes the statement that if we could see what he sees, that we would choose no other path through this life than the path that he marked out for us. All grief and pain included. She's not ready to hear that. I wish she had known it before this ever happened. But I trust him. I trust him. He loves my sister more than I do. He loved my nephew more than I do. I trust him. He does all things well. And someday, days like this will be forgotten. And life will never end.